So we're going to go to the post game in just a couple minutes. Don't forget, folks. I gotta change this right quick so we can do this. Don't forget, folks. You can leave us a message at 1-940-289-7234. We'll be talking about a couple other things, taking y'all's calls and questions. But we're going to talk about the Trump stuff. You know, at a certain point, like, I don't know, everyone knows it. I think Matt and I are going to talk more holistically about what we think about it. I think Matt and I generally agree, but maybe there'll be a friendly debate. You'll have to see at patreon.com / left reckoning. I wanted to do a quick segment that we're debuting this week, and we're going to probably do more of these, which we're going to call quick takes, right? Where we sort of take a topic and we talk about it for a couple minutes before we run. And this week I wanted to talk about an idea that I think is too hegemonic, to use a fancy word, on the left right now. I'm going to talk about it actually more technically and theoretically during the Griscom stream this week. I've been working on it for a little while, but maybe as just a teaser, I wanted to talk about some of the tendencies that we see on the left when it comes to talking about the general public. I don't know if you have this aversion that I do, Matt. I don't like the term normie that
No,
people
yeah.
use. I think it's really alienating. I get what people are trying to get at. Like, there's no doubt about it that people who consume a lot of political media and all this kind of stuff maybe aren't representative of like the general media consumption habits of the general population.
Mhm.
But it creates this weird divide, right? Between like you as a listener, you as a creator, whatever, and like the rest of the public. Because like, look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm, out of line here, but like I find myself to be a fairly normal person. Like, I don't make a lot of money. I have to work on the side. I live in the same community I grew up in. I live in the same town I grew up in. I talk to my neighbors, I talk to my friends, etc. Right. And like I've always just been like a working class kid. Maybe one thing that's unique about me is that, like, yes, I am a socialist, right? But I came to that from being from where I'm from being a working class person, from wanting a better world. And these kind of weird walls that people create between themselves and like the rest of society, I don't think is a very good tactic for building like solidarity and community and all these kind of things, right?
Right.
But that's a minor quibble. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is this kind of idea, and we've talked about all time on left reckoning, but it's just this idea that like the American public is sort of sleepwalking their way through life, and maybe like, and what our goal is as like enlightened members of society is that we're going to shake people and wake them up, right? You see it on our side in the way people say, oh, I think everyone's a socialist, they just don't know enough yet, right? And look, I think political education is important because what political education does is not teach you that things are messed up and that you're being abused and your boss doesn't have your best interest. What it does is it connects a lot of things together so that you can see yourself as a member of a class, rather than yourself as an individual who sort of just has on the wrong end of the stick, right? um but this idea that like people are confused or bamboozled or don't understand the world around them, I think is a very, very big problem in a lot of like left wing outreach. And also just like on the level of like strategy. Like, if you think that like the problem is like we just haven't created the right media or we haven't put forward the right argument, right? We get questions all the time on the show, right, Matt, about how do I talk to this person or how do I talk to that person? How do I win this fight, right? And, I know it might be a little boring, but we always come back to the same thing. Like, the only thing that you can do is try to work very hard to build the organization and the unity and the effectiveness of yourself as a member of the working class to be able to build institutions and organizations that are able to achieve the things that we get at. Like, I just like, you look at it time and time again. You look at like support for Medicare for all, extremely high. You look at support for unions, extremely high. The question here is not about waking up the sleeping masses, right? To like why these are the right ideas. It's showing them that doing this is in their benefit and will be achievable. A lot of people, when they hear things like a just transition, like Medicare for all, like higher rates of unionization, they're like, I want those things. I like those things, right? That's not the qualm. The qualm is, you know, I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time with people on the outskirts of society, pushing for something that I don't think is going to work out. I might be more interested in sort of looking out for my immediate interests and my family's interests and trying to see if I can, create like an island for myself that is able to escape these things. And that's a bad mentality, right? I'm not saying that's not a problem, but it's a much more rational and realistic look at the world than this kind of idea that like all these people are just so confused, they don't understand the world around them. And you see this time and time again in media, right? Like the most recent thing was this like Marjorie Taylor Greene thing on 60 Minutes. And like, look, 60 Minutes sucks, y'all. Like, I don't think I have to say that, but just going to say that. Like, I watched the interview, I watched the full thing. It wasn't great. Stall, right? Didn't hit like the points she could have hit. But then there's all this kind of like, oh, they're platform Marjorie Taylor Greene, and like she's going to bamboozle and confuse people. It's like, the people who are already going to think that the Democratic Party is a cabal of like pedophiles were already there before they interacted with that sense of media. And I think
Yeah.
more problematic for me than like the quality of the 60 Minutes thing is like this tendency on the left to be like, well, all these people are just like so easily bamboozled and so easily tricked by rhetoric from the right, that like, we have to be against this just like for for the specific reason that they interviewed this person, because you have a very low expectation of your neighbors, your comrades, your coworkers, that they see something like this and they're going to get pulled into that stream. I think that's a really bad mentality to build a kind of strong working class movement. I think MTG is extremely dangerous. I think the movement she represents is very, not just dangerous, it's cruel, it's wicked, and it's certainly not going to do anything to improve people's lives, right? I'm with you on all of those criticisms here, except for the one that you don't think that people have the ability to be able to work through these things. And even more so, I disagree with the idea that like what we need is for media elites in this country to sift through information and present it in a way, to you or to the public at large, that is like very explicit, like this is the bad idea, this is the good idea, right?
Yeah.
um because I think it's a very infantilizing idea. I think it's very condescending. And look, the right exists in this country, and the right is growing in ways that it should alarm you, right? And the way that we have to deal with that is by building our own, um like expressing and like building up platforms to be able to do this, our own view of the world, so that we're pulling people towards us, versus sort of hoping that super super rich and influential people are sort of telling people this is good idea, this is bad idea, right? And this fixation that we've seen since Trump came into power, that we sort of want these people sitting at the top of society to sort of designate to the masses truth and fiction, I've found to be a very, very dangerous outsourcing of what is our responsibility, to be building something, that is not only critiquing and saying Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Trump movement, etc., don't got nothing for you, and in fact they are against your interests, right? But we're also building something that can achieve those kind of interests.
Yeah, I mean that's the 2 points. One is just that, faith and fellow man democracy point, where it's similar to the rank and file. Like, is UAW going to trust its rank and file to do this stuff, or do they need to be shepherded? The second is you're giving 60 Minutes way too much credit. Okay, so what if they pulled the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, right? And they even
Yeah.
conceded, like, yeah, Leslie Stahl didn't do a good job here. We're pulling it. Well, then what you've done is frankly legitimize the rest of 60 Minutes when they have Larry Summers come on like 8 times a
That's
year,
so
come on
true.
and say like working people, need to starve more, and this is just like what the numbers tell me.
Or on the
So
other
yeah,
side, Or on the other
but
side, what if it was just an epic Jon Stewart style hypocrisy segment? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that moves us any closer to building a working class movement in this country. Do you get what I mean? Like, even
I
if like
mean,
the
yeah,
content was good in the sense of like, oh, every point she made is debunked. I guess like here's what I'm saying. It's like we know we criticize the media all the time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I think what bothers me, Matt, is, or what I'm trying to get at, is the condescending mentality, is
right.
that like people can't figure out for themselves these things. I think that that's a real impediment to building something different. Um, and I think it's a mentality that really needs to get dropped. Like, like, um, Oh Lord, and help me. Who's the author of What's the Matter with Kansas? The Baffler.
Oh, now you've made it go out of my head.
Sorry, friend.
Shit,
Um,
sorry, bro.
Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank.
Frank, yeah,
Thomas
yeah.
Frank. And like, look, that's one of those books too, by the way, that people cite all the time by like naming the title of it, which is
We're
like
exactly
very,
wrong.
which is like not what he even argues in that book. What he argues is
Right.
that like the Democratic Party and the left in Kansas used to be for workers and they stopped being for workers. And then it wasn't surprising that the Republicans were able to take advantage of that. Like Thomas Frank's argument there is that the Democratic Party failed the voters there. They failed the working class there. Not that, oh, the people of Kansas are so stupid they can't understand what's going on around them. But again, like this is sort of like it just cited it. You just cite the title, and like this kind of like bad faith mentality. Bad faith is like a fancy term for like not knowing your own interests, not understanding yourself, and acting in a different way. And I'm going to talk more like theoretically about this using like Marx and stuff on Thursday. So I don't want to jump too much into it, but like the ideology as the reason that like ideology in the sense of like the way that people understand the world around them that's sort of given to us through media, through culture, through education, is what is creating this crisis. I think is wrong. I think it's wrong, and it was a bad turn from the left, and it should not surprise people that this is something that came about at the time when left wing and Marxist or Marx adjacent intellectuals turned their back on class analysis and went almost entirely into culture. Right, this is when this thing becomes sort of dominant in like left wing thought, and you see what the results are. Right, and, you can criticize movies and television all you want, but has that got us any closer to a strong working class movement in this country? I don't think you can
Yeah.
say
Well,
that.
also, I mean, this goes back to this does go back to Trump winning, and it is, like the false reasoning that it was because CNN cut to his debates and gave him free earned media,
Yeah,
which they did. But that's the reason he won. And no, like the reason they did that and the reason he won are basically the same thing. Because he was good TV and going to win the
totally.
presidency against somebody who sucked. That's like I think, yeah, I think it is all just like trying to blame media for what was a political failing.
So that's the the longer version of the quick take. I'm talking about this more in depth on Thursday. I will just respond, since this is more of a Griscom stream topic, to something in the chat. Shami says, I agree with you, David, but who on the left are you talking about? I haven't heard anyone on the left that I respect talk or think like that. Would appreciate a steer as to who you were talking about. I don't mean this as a cop out, but like, look, this is something I experience all the time. And if you don't believe me, like go on my Twitter right now. I was arguing with people all morning about this. Um, you can see me going back and forth with folks on this very specific topic. Slavoj Žižek, for example, is somebody who promotes this idea. If you want like a big figure, I highly suggest watching his debate with Vivek Chibber on the question of ideology. Zizek's somebody I like. I'm interested in. I've read a lot of his stuff, probably more than most other people. Not trying to whatever, but like I was like really into Lacan and psychoanalysis for a long time, so I spent like a very prolonged Zizekian period of my life. But that's somebody who makes these kind of arguments. Right, like this is like if you don't believe me, fine, but like I experience this all the time in my regular.
I think the general vibe about I mean, you could read it more charitably as people were going to say, "Oh, 60 Minutes is going to do a bad job," but there were people saying just the mere fact that this media product
Well, the
exists is a
platforming thing is
failing.
it's almost a separate issue, but the platforming thing I also think is again something that's inherited not from Marxism or socialism, but something that's inherited from liberalism, right?
Yeah.
Like here's the thing like where maybe me and Ben even disagree. I'm actually like less worked up about people as a community like showing up at somebody's talk and like coming at them, right? Than other folks are, because I think that that's a very real expression of community power, right? But I might disagree with some of the people in the membership there say, well, the platforming is a problem. The problem is that these are bad ideas that we have to defeat and engage with and destroy, right?
Yeah.
Versus saying like, oh, if these things get a platform, then they will become powerful, right? Which is again like a very liberal idealist way of looking at politics, right? Where it's like ideas shape the world rather than material conditions. Anyways, like I'm like spoiling the deck for what I'm going to talk about on Thursday. So if this titillated your interest, come and watch the Griscom stream Thursday afternoon, and I'll get way more depth
Yeah.
into this than I will right now.
I will just quote John Milton, probably liberal, but revolutionary. I cannot praise a fugitive and cloistered virtue. And that's what he wrote in
There you go.
Areopagitica about anti-freedom of speech. Yeah, that's what a lot of people want. And it's just like, that shit doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
even if you want it to work, that is, there's nothing to it. There's nothing behind it.
Well, friends and Left Reckoners, we're going to jump over the post game. Matt, since he did such a historical task of indicting Trump himself, overcoming the other jurors.
I'm
I'm just
going
kidding,
to
folks, just to be very clear.
going to break down all of the laws that I disregarded in pushing for this indictment.
No, but Matt and I are going to talk about it because, like, I have probably like a pretty mainstream lefty socialist take on. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's a big historical deal. So we're going to chat about that. We're going to be taking your calls and questions. I have a quick segment on trains in Texas that we'll do. And we'll see all of y'all over there. Don't forget, you can leave us a message at 1940-289-7234. Appreciate everyone so much. And we'll see you all in just a couple minutes. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Peace.